Hello, and thank you for joining the webinar on Safeguarding Tomorrow, Citywide Safety through Interagency Collaboration. My name is Daryl Edwards. I am the Executive Partners Manager for the National League of Cities Strategic Partnership Department. NLC is thrilled to partner with Peregrine on this event. Peregrine has been a valued partner with NLC for some time, and we've been consistently impressed with their dedication to supporting local governments with some of the most intractable issues we face, namely local governments with public safety. We would like to thank Peregrine for their partnership and leadership on these issues. Today, we will hear from Captain James Nakayama of the Concord Police Department in Concord, California, Katie Ward, the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the City of Atlanta, retired Chief Susan Manheimer of the Oakland Police Department, and Dr. Jeffrey Butts, Director of Research and Evaluation at John Jay College. These panelists will emphasize the crucial need for collaboration across diverse municipal agencies, going beyond the realms of traditional public safety, such as police and fire rescue. They'll explore the importance of establishing partnerships with schools, public health, housing, and public works, fully utilizing and maximizing different skills, data, and interventions. By the end of this webinar, we hope that you will have discovered how you can take the lead in implementing evidence-based approaches, playing a pivotal role in cultivating safer and healthier communities for all. With that said, I'll pass it to Tim.
Daryl, thank you so much for kicking us off. And thank you to the National League of Cities for co-hosting this webinar with us. We here at Peregrine are so excited to be hosting this conversation. My name is Tim Shriver. I lead business development here at Peregrine Technologies. And as part of that work, I get to work with city and county leaders across the country who are tackling the question we'll be talking about today, which is how do we take collaborative approaches to public safety? How do we bring together people and information and interventions from a wide variety of departments, from a wide variety of specialties to tackle this challenge of public safety, which we know is not just the work of law enforcement, not just the work of these traditional public safety agencies, but the work of the whole city and county government. So today we'll be hearing from a couple of practitioners who are doing this work every day, one on the civilian side and one on the sworn law enforcement side. And then we'll hear from two national experts who will be sharing what they've learned from decades of watching and working in this space, researching this space, leading in this space over the course of decades. So we are so excited to welcome this group here today. And with that, I would love to introduce our first panelist, Captain James Nakayama from the Concord Police Department in California. Captain James Nakayama serves as the operations captain and brings 20 years of law enforcement service. He currently commands the Field Operations Division at the Concord Police Department, which includes patrol, proactive units in the Bureau of Community Operations, and all other uniformed department members. He holds a bachelor's in biological science and a master's in criminal justice. At his department, he has held command positions in criminal investigations, traffic, SWAT, and other training and administrative assignments. Captain Nakayama, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Hi, Tim. Hey, thanks so much for inviting us, and thank you to the National League of Cities and to Peregrine for allowing us to share some of our progress that we've had over the past year or so. We titled this presentation "Surfacing and Utilizing Data for Public Safety and Transparency," but just for a little bit of context, we're in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're 139 sworn, 56 professional staff, and I find us kind of in that space of a small to mid-size agency up in Northern California. And for some background, I do want to explain that good or bad, we had some homegrown applications that we created and systems here that we developed in-house to meet our search, crime, and administrative analytics needs. They met our needs for a period of time, but as we had to transition to a new computer-aided dispatch system and a records management system to write police reports, and as we've added on all these different databases and applications to help us do our jobs more effectively, meet the needs of the community, we found that we needed to find a solution to future-proof our data and analytics needs. And for our organization, we turned to Peregrine for that. And as we did that, I'm going to click over to my next slide here. We're looking for the way to join, compare, and contrast some of the disparate databases that we had. And those databases, for those that work in law enforcement community, we understand them to be our CAD system, records management system. We also have the ability to ingest and take complaints from our community members, for issues, whether it is a homeless encampment or some persistent nuisance or blight issue. But then we also wanted to take in information related to personnel issues and use of force data. How do we more easily surface and utilize our body-worn camera, license plate reader data, and other databases? So as we were looking for solutions, we needed to find a comprehensive data wrapper to address that. As we have all these different databases, as an organization, we found ourselves to be data rich and information poor and intelligence poor. We had all these applications and data, but we weren't able to easily and dynamically query across the different databases. So we were looking for a solution for that, as well as visualizing and surfacing the data. There's data at the spreadsheet and level for analysis, but we also needed a way to represent that organizationally to our staff members, also to other department members within the city, the different community partners that we work with, and also the public. So we were looking for solutions on that to visualize it and help us to better partner and collaborate and innovate strategies to problem solve. And then on the other end of things, we also needed to find a way to share our story and to effectively deploy, explain why we're deploying our limited resources in a certain way and to help us easily identify issues. And today, I have just two examples of how we're using Peregrine to join our databases, to dynamically query information, drill down to specific issues, and determine effective strategies to problem solve. And this first one that we have here is related to our homeless dashboards, and it really highlights how we're able to take our CAD or computer-aided dispatch information, which is complaints that we get from the public, from a non-emergency line or for emergency calls to service, and also for the non-emergent calls that we get for homeless-related issues, whether it's nuisance, blight, impacts to roadways or crosswalks or sidewalks, different public locations. We're able to take all that information and put it into a mapping function within Peregrine. And what you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen is a heat map, really to identify where we're getting high concentrations. But then when we get into the problem identification and problem solving, we can drill down a little bit further onto an example on the right-hand side on a default map that shows at an incident level. And what this really allows us to do is to, when we meet on a every other month basis with our different community partners and department members within the city through Public Works and through our county homeless outreach teams, we're able to drill down and look at not just where we're having the problems, but we're able to get to the specifics. We can look at direct calls to service, the individuals who may need services from the county, what types of issues are coming up. We can look at photographs. We can look at body-worn camera from footage from the officers that respond out. So that way we can actually have a very holistic and comprehensive approach to addressing the problems at hand. And the next slide that I have, this is one where back in 2019, we actually had a local tragedy where there was an individual that was suffering from a mental health crisis and unfortunately had a tragic ending when he was killed during a law enforcement related contact. And in 2020 in our area and across the nation, there was obviously calls for civil unrest not calls for civil unrest, but there was civil unrest. And in our local area, there's a call to find a non-law enforcement response to mental health crisis. We put an internal process in place to fully utilize an existing county program that has mental health clinicians that go out on a response basis, but it wasn't robustly built out. We leaned on them heavily, and recently our county and Contra Costa County has a comprehensive program where there are 24/7 clinicians that are available, and we're able to divert calls. But we didn't have a way within our organization or even through the county to find out how many calls that we were diverting. In our organization, we actually developed this process back in late 2020, early 21 to divert our calls. We had a procedure in place to divert the calls over to the county when they're available. But what our chief had the question was, how many calls do we get related to mental health crisis and where are they? How many do we divert to the mobile crisis response team or MCRT? and how many times did we co-respond. So on this dashboard, it ingests all this information from our computer-aided dispatch system. We were able to leverage some of the labeling functions that we have within it in order to identify which calls MCRT handled, ones that we co-responded on, ones where they weren't available. And we also built in a deconfliction tool, so we had the ability to identify if our SOP or our process for relabeling those calls wasn't in place. We can go back on an individual incident basis to look at that. I ran this report just last week, but you can see in the last 90 days, we've had 195 identified calls to service that would fall under a mobile crisis response team or a mental health call for service. We also have the ability to map those locations, and we can hotspot them need be. So if we need to identify areas where we need to put resources or request resources at a county level for individuals ahead of time, we can do that as well. And then also some statistics related to the types of calls for service that we have been receiving. And just in closing, there's a lot of organizational and community benefits that we have for clarity and transparency about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And we find that one of the biggest benefits we received is it is a conversation engagement initiator. This information surfaced. Some of these reports and queries would take weeks or maybe even months to get, and right now we can dynamically get them within just a few minutes of making some modifications on a report. So internally, externally, it is a huge conversation and engagement initiator, and really has forced our supervisors, but also our managers in the organization, our leaders, to really know our data better, which is really a must in our current times for public sector leadership. And in that, I am completed.
Thank you so much, Captain Nakayama. Actually, will you turn your video back on and join us for a couple of quick questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much. And to everyone listening, you're welcome to throw some questions in the chat. We will be monitoring those and welcome your questions for Captain Nakayama. This is your chance to ask them. But I had a couple questions for you, Captain, and I'm just curious, just to like jump off that last point, because my first reaction when I first got to see these dashboards is like the conversations they could enable could be pretty powerful. And you mentioned that at the end, and I just wanted to know, can you give us some examples of the kind of conversations they've allowed you to have, whether that's with the county, with elected officials, with city residents, with neighborhood groups? Like, what are the kind of conversations you can now have with this information at your fingertips?
Tim, I appreciate the question. So this is a huge one. I'm actually glad that we're on this this MCRT dashboard, and the program has just converted names. It's called A3 now within Contra Costa County, and it's about the police department and really public safety being able to demonstrate to the community that we are meeting their needs. We didn't have the ability to identify how many types of calls that we were taking in on a on a monthly basis, how many times that we did divert. And what I'm trying to say is now we have the data, and we have something graphical that we can share out in the community, that we can explain to people, no, we are meeting your needs. This is what it looks like. But also for our county partners, it highlights the need. And I think that's one of the driving factors in us using data, is we all want to use data appropriately, and we want to make sure that we're being transparent about it. And we can anecdotally identify, hey, we have these issues, but when we have these dashboards that are built out with our attributes and our filtering functions, we can actually go to the specifics and give people some very clear understanding of the challenges that we do have. And then we can start talking, moving from that problem identification mode and start moving into a problem solving mode.
So yeah, that's incredibly interesting. And I'm curious, like, so what I want to hear is conversations with residents about what you actually are doing and are achieving, conversations with the county. I'm thinking specifically about the homelessness dashboard as well. What are the conversations that allows you to have with elected officials?
Sure. So on the last slide, we actually, the geographic areas that were on there for the calls to service, that was based on our geographic or beat locations for those calls to service. Within any city, within any county, I know that there's going to be challenges and resources. I don't believe any city has or any county has more resources than they really need. Really what this does is it allows our organization to share back to the community, but also to our elected officials and other members within the city about why those limited resources are deployed a certain way. So very dynamically, those structures or the actual geographic areas, they can be changed into districts within a county, districts within a city, to really identify where those issues are. So when leaders within an organization, within public works or a police department, sheriff's department, are explaining why those deputies or those workers are going to a certain area to address quality of life issues or blight issues or criminal issues, we're able to actually identify where those problems are, so we can go back to our constituents and explain the deployment of those limited resources.
Yeah. So one last question we got from the group, and then we're gonna move on. I'll let you go. But we got a question about how you share this. Are you sharing screenshots of this dashboard, links to this dashboard with other entities within the city? How are you sharing this information with partners you're having these conversations?
Yeah, so it depends on the nature of the information. Obviously, there's going to be a criminal justice information system, limitations of what we can share. But what I will say is we have utilized these dynamically, and we have internal staff meetings. So we'll use these to develop, problem identify, and also to come up with strategies of resource deployment, enforcement strategies. But we do share them with our county partners. We also share it with our city partners in public works specifically related to some of the homeless issues, and we're able to get to drill down to the individual events that are causing these calls to service or requests for services, so we can better utilize our staff time to work on the problems that are causing the most issues.
Got it. Thank you. So I actually have one more question before I let you go. And this kind of zooms out, I think, from these dashboards. There's this question from the crowd, which is, do you all utilize a real-time crime center or anything like that to navigate and control data in one location, or what are kind of other parts of your technology solutions?
Yeah, we haven't delved into, and it's fascinating, the idea of real-time crime centers. Some agencies are diving into that. We haven't taken a deep dive into it. I think we're kind of at the point where we're getting all of our databases aligned. I think we needed to build a lot of internal organizational understanding and appreciation of the work that it takes, and make sure that we're ingesting data appropriately on the front end, processing it, and on the back end. So we are actually kind of comprehensively front to back, taking our data in. So we haven't delved into real-time crime centers. There are some options in the future, and we're working on some strategies of what that may look like in the future for us.
Yeah, and what I hear in that is that your city doesn't have to have a real-time crime center or any of these things, kind of these rooms built out or these special centers built out in order to take this kind of data-driven approach that you all have pioneered and conquered.
No, and I think that's the beauty of this, is there's a crime searching applicability. So down to your officer and your detective, when they need to find information related to an investigation that they're working, there's so much power being able to search across multiple databases, and also the information data sharing that we have with our local partners within the county. And that's that cross-platform, cross-agency collaboration that exists with Peregrine. But then we get into the other side of the actual analysis and deployment. Once these dashboards are built out, they can be shared across your organization, and anybody can access them and use them, which is really nice. It's not just one particular staff member that has access to them.
Well, Captain Nakayama, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing this great work that's coming out of Concord. We really appreciate you being here and the partnership of your department.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, so moving right along, we are so grateful to have Katie Ward here from the City of Atlanta. Katie is the Director of Strategic Partnerships in the Atlanta Mayor's Office, and in her role, she creates and oversees a variety of partnerships between outside organizations to further the mayor's vision. Prior to joining the City of Atlanta last year, she completed a master's in public policy from Georgetown, and while there, she served in Senator Ossoff's office as a staffer on his judiciary portfolio for a year and a half. She's worked for several years in the philanthropic and fundraising industry in Atlanta prior to her government experience. Katie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us the work going on in the City of Atlanta.
Thank you so much, Tim. Appreciate it. And I'm excited to be with you all today to talk about our approach to public safety that we're working on in the City of Atlanta. So hopefully I will be able to flip my slides. Yes. So like most cities, we have a goal in the city of Atlanta to make it as safe as possible for all who live, work, play, and visit here. And to do this, the mayor has charged a small team in his office to take a slightly different strategy than just looking at law enforcement interventions or just kind of this siloed approach of each department owning their lane of public safety, if applicable, to a really whole of government approach. And I'll break that down here in this next slide. But essentially what we have been tasked with is to take not just intuition or not just experience in the field, but to really take data and be informed by it to decide both what is needed and what has been working. And that's where our work with Peregrine has come in, that I'll talk more about in a minute. And then, of course, as I mentioned, this whole of government approach to address these issues that we're seeing in the city. And I should just note that we feel very fortunate in the city of Atlanta to have such strong law enforcement partners and to be on a positive trend with our crime numbers, that we have seen downward shifts in both violent crime and other types of crime that we really want to see. So this work is stemming out of success and that momentum, not necessarily out of crisis mode, but we want to take this whole of government approach to say, okay, yes, the kind of key public safety partners like law enforcement or our mayor's office of violence reduction, but also those departments that are a little more tangentially related, like city planning and parks and rec and transportation, and say, how can you all work with us for a whole of government strategy? And to do that, we want to both address root causes and immediate effects of violence. So the systemic, sustainable solutions that will really shift whole communities, as well as those things that we need to do today to deter and stop violence. So that's our task. How we think about that is in a few key areas. So we've got people that are, sometimes referred to as high-risk individuals, those that are particularly vulnerable to both perpetuating and being victimized by crime. We have places where neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested and have a myriad of challenges that really, if affected, could create environments that are safer and stop the perpetuation of crime and violence, as well as the internal operations of the city itself. So what are the things we're doing as a city in the way that we process business licenses, in the ways that we address permitting and zoning and affordable housing, and how are all those things playing together to affect safety and ultimately to achieve the mayor's long-term vision, which is to make Atlanta the best city to raise a child. So we engaged Peregrine, some other partners, to begin this work, and we are very much at the beginning of this. But one thing Peregrine has been very helpful with is particularly the place-based work that we're interested in. So we asked for their help in sort of looking at our neighborhoods as a whole in the city of Atlanta and finding a few key metrics that would be critical to, give us some indications of the health of our neighborhoods. And so we by no means think these are comprehensive. We know there's a wealth of research and best practice around leading indices that point to neighborhood health, but we picked a few key areas with a key indicator that we wanted to just get a good gut check or a temperature check on the health of our neighborhoods. And so for housing, we looked at code violations. For health, we looked at how many grocery stores are in the area. For education, we looked at how many elementary schoolers are churning in and out of the schools and not remaining in one school for the year. And then we also looked at business density to see where are communities, seeing investment in business and where are we seeing divestment or just stagnation in business development. And so I won't go into a lot of detail here, but suffice it to say, this slide just says we've got a very wide variety of all of those metrics throughout the city. It varied neighborhood by neighborhood. And I'll go ahead and show you sort of the final project of this sort of pilot of this work, which is the left side shows you that scoring kind of on a gradation, from green being the highest scoring of a composite of those factors to yellow being medium and then red being lowest scoring on those indicators. And then comparing that to the slide on the right, which shows a heat map of sorts of some of our violent crime in the area. And so when we look at these, we can see a few things, and what we want this work to do is really guide our efforts in targeting interventions. So in some areas, we see a really strong correlation between these health indicators and our violent crime, and others we don't. And so that helps guide our work of, Are we looking at the right metrics to start with? And if we are, what are the other levers we need to be pulling, because there doesn't seem to be as much of a connection between some of these health scores and our crime. And so just really quickly, if we look at a couple neighborhoods that were right next to each other, relatively similar size, but really different in the amount of violent crime per capita. And so what does that tell us? And we looked closer at some of the scoring that we did. And I know this is small, but the key point is that this neighborhood on the left that has a lower overall score showed a lot of, on every single health metric that we looked at, so code violations, grocery stores, elementary school churn, and then business license, lower in every way. And then, of course, it had this corresponding higher level of crime, and so crime against persons specifically. And so what this told us is that, when you combine this data that we know, as well as the context of living and working in the city and knowing a little bit about these neighborhoods, it helps inform our work about what potential interventions could be deployed in this neighborhood that are working well in an adjoining neighborhood and that we've gotten to see over time. So that's really the hope of this place-based work that we've started with Peregrine. And also we showed this recently to a lot of our colleagues in the city with the hope that they would be inspired and encouraged to share some of their data. So whether, again, that's city planning, that's watershed, all of these different places that have their own data silo, that how much power could be in sharing that and putting it on one platform for the purpose of informing our public safety work. So that's really what we hope for. And really quickly also, Peregrine did some great work with us around person-centered evaluation and analysis as well that we're really excited about. And we've sort of just started digging into, but this was our youth under 18 offenses. We've mapped it again by neighborhood to see where it's occurring. We've also done some work to see where those youth are living. And so we can really see, the migratory patterns of crime in our city, and that it's almost can be more helpful when you're thinking about a neighborhood approach to look at where people are living in terms of targeting an intervention than necessarily looking at where the crime is occurring. And this chart down here at the bottom, I just want to draw attention to, is showing us how many repeat offenders are committing some of our most popular crimes, for lack of a better word. And we see that in our highest crime, top crimes, we're seeing a lot of repeat offense with youth. And so that tells us, again, that we really want to focus on stopping that intervention, stopping and intervening after a first offense, and how much more power that can have to decrease escalation. And again, we looked at violent offenders as a whole, repeat offenders specifically, to try to understand their patterns and where's our opportunities for intervention with people that are at risk for reoffending. And this data that Peregrine helped put together on the left just really shows that when someone has committed a violent repeat offense, what their prior offenses were, so that we can see what is sort of the trajectory people tend to go on. And to not a big surprise, simple assault is the most common offense prior to a violent offense. And that really affirmed that our approach to stopping those early potentially minor offenses from escalating is really going to be a key part of our work. So I'll stop there, but just to say that, again, our work has just begun in this space, but we really see so much potential in looking at both people and a place to find the right interventions to then go out to our partners within the city, as well as in surrounding jurisdictions, to find the right solutions for different neighborhoods and for different populations.
Thank you so much, Katie. So I have a few questions for you, and I'll just repeat to the group. If you have questions, please send them across. We had a couple of great ones for Captain Nakayama. But I'll kick things off. I'm curious. I mean, I want to say I really appreciate you all sharing your work that is still in motion. As you said, like, you all are just at the beginning of this effort to tackle this kind of place-based and person-based interventions for non-law enforcement interventions and tackling public safety in your city. What, maybe just starting with the neighborhood scorecard piece and the place-based efforts, what do you hope to see 6, 12 months from now? Like, what are the next steps from here that get you really excited?
Yeah, it's a great question. We actually, as I mentioned, convened our senior leaders last week and did that exercise of what success looks like with that group, including the mayor. And we all, of course, want to see crime go down. I think that's a key indicator. But we know that in order to do that, we have to start today and really right now with some efforts. And so, on our end, I think what that looks like is a little bit more internal planning. It looks like engaging the right partners, like Peregrine. We've done a lot of I think the groundwork and the foundation setting with other departments to educate them on what we're trying to do, so that hopefully they're engaged when we, request data, or they're engaged when we ask them to do something that doesn't quite fit into their bread and butter objective, but we know will affect public safety. So I think for us, what success looks like is the whole of our city government, particularly in 6 months or a year, starting to see the result of what it looks like when we work together on this kind of work, and to start to see, when Katie and their team called me up about kind of a random project, oh, I'm starting to see now that this whole neighborhood is changing, and that, we have teams that specialize particularly in the neighborhood work, so I can't speak to exactly their methodology, but I know that they are counting on and need the city buy-in to do that. And so I hope that buy-in is starting to pay off by the time 6 months or a year rolls around. And of course, these lagging indicators of crime will hopefully follow that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a question. I think this maybe I'll frame it in terms of kind of collaboration across the city. But one of the questions were, are these dashboards a result of live connections to police department, CAD, and RMS? And maybe just you can answer that question, but also answer the larger question of like, what does partnership with your police department look like? You're coming from the mayor's office and you're working with the police department. Obviously, some of this is police department data. Can you tell us a little bit more about that partnership you all have?
Yeah, and Peregrine's been instrumental in that, because our police department has already been working with Peregrine on just kind of the specific law enforcement and criminal data aspect of it. So it was very easy for us to start working with them in that sense, because they had access to that data already. And what, in terms of the other data that we've incorporated, most of that is either publicly accessible data and or data that we've received somewhat in a static format, but our hope is that it becomes dynamic. We're very fortunate to have a police department and a police chief in particular, that inextricably links their work with other city departments, and really his kind of go-to motto is that the three biggest crime fighters are a stable home life, economic opportunity, and education. And so our police department, of course, is there to intervene, to stop crime, to catch the people that need to be taken off the streets, but they also welcome partnership consistently. And there are other places and opportunities the police department uses, like an athletic league with youth, and other opportunities like that. We have whole centers called At Promise centers that engage our law enforcement community with our youth community that might otherwise be considered high risk, to try to build those connections. So that is not something uncommon for our law enforcement department. So I think work like this that involves sharing data, they see as an extension of that work to not only make their jobs easier, but make the city safer, which is not, they don't view as their exclusive purview.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it is a remarkable partnership you all have with the police department, and a tribute to the leadership and on both sides. I'm curious, or another question I got, which I think is a good one for you to tackle, is whether Atlanta uses a multidisciplinary team of folks to conduct this kind of analysis, and if so, like, where are those folks coming from, and how did you develop, like, who's the team that's building this and working together on this?
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. So I, as well as the two primary other leads on this project, my boss Megan and our colleague Chanel, all sit under the mayor's office of the chief policy officer. So this is a new policy department that was created under this mayor, and our chief policy officer, Courtney English, is a close advisor and friend of the mayor. And they really work hand in hand, and the mayor has charged Courtney and our team to look at some of the city's most intractable problems that do by nature span across different departments and different jurisdictions. And so some of those other challenges include affordable housing, youth development, and the neighborhood transformation work that I've been alluding to. And so this is another part of that work that our team, who sort of sits at this intersection of policy and of solving these really complicated problems, we then bring in other key colleagues in different departments as needed to help build out this work. So we have folks on the operations side that work very closely with our police department. We have, as I mentioned, a mayor's office of violence reduction. So all of these people work with us very closely. And then our role is by nature to be that sort of bridge in between the operational side as well as the sort of strategic visionary side to make these very ambitious goals come to life.
Yeah, so I guess one thing we encounter a lot at Peregrine, and you kind of already spoken to this, but I wanted to ask you to speak a little bit more to it, which is that, you know, we can help on the technical side, but one of the great challenges is the people side, right? Collaboration across city departments. People have incredibly difficult jobs, limited resources. It sounds like this policy office is a really key part of enabling that collaboration. But do you have another key lesson or takeaway for folks listening for how to enable collaboration across departments in their city?
Yeah, I mean, I would not say at all that I'm the authority on this. Our work is just beginning, but I would say something that we have found, especially when we talk about sharing data or sharing information, that we really want or really need to do our specific assignment or project well. It can be difficult if that department is not, this isn't their primary goal or function, and they have other KPIs they're being measured by, to quite frankly get them invested in that project and be an active participant. And so one thing we are kind of constantly trying to do and iterate on is to really understand what a department or what a leader is both measured by and motivated by. So what will they be measured by, and how is that in parallel to what we're working on? Is that in contrast to what we're working on? And so that helps us know how we can tailor our approach, our ask, our request to make it, to connect it to what they're measured by, as well as what they're motivated by. And so those are not always the same thing. Sometimes they are, but really understanding if I'm the Department of Watershed leader and public safety is not my domain, what am I motivated by that does align with the work that we're trying to do. So those will be the two pieces that I would say, again, we're kind of always iterating on and trying to find, but my biggest takeaway is to find those and align them with the project you're doing.
Well, that's terrific. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you sharing the great work going on in the city of Atlanta and taking some time out of your day for us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So for our final piece of this conversation, I am very excited to welcome on two national experts to share different perspectives on how we approach integrated public safety in our cities and our counties, our communities across the country. So as Susan and Jeff join us, I will share a little bit of who you'll be hearing from. Chief Oppenheimer retired after a distinguished 39-year service career across 4 diverse police agencies in the San Francisco Bay Area of California, with deep experience in forging partnerships to reduce crime and enhance outcomes. She began her career in San Francisco, where she served for 17 years and led initiatives across community policing, youth and gang reduction. While the captain of the Tenderloin Station, she formed coalition and generated innovative programs, including early focused deterrence initiatives and programs such as Take Back the Tenderloin, the Juvenile Diversion Program, and Homelessness Outreach. In 2000, she became the San Mateo, California Police Department chief, only the 4th police chief in the female police chief in the state of California. And 20 years later, when she retired, she was one of the most senior tenured chiefs in the state. There at SMPD, she pioneered effective and creative strategies to control crime, build trust, improve safety, and ensure restorative outcomes. She was the driving force behind several countywide programs, including the Countywide Gang Task Force, the Juvenile Assessment and Referral Center, the Human Trafficking Task Force, and the Homelessness Outreach Team. Since then, she was tapped for 2 interim chief positions, First at Oakland Police Department and then San Leandro, where she provided leadership stability while embracing reforms and intervention strategies to combat increases in violent crime while building trust. Today, she wears many hats, including serving as a strategic site liaison for the U.S. Department of Justice, the Bureau of Justice Assistance Public Safety Partnerships Program, providing technical training and assistance to cities and agencies, pairing crime reduction and community engagement strategies and support. Chief Manheimer, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I think I just sound really old, but thank you.
Incredibly accomplished. Incredibly accomplished. We're so lucky to have you. Well, Dr. Jeffrey Butts is also with us, and he is the Director of Research and Evaluation, the Research and Evaluation Center at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. His work focuses on discovering and improving the effectiveness of policies and programs related to the justice system. Previously, he was the Research Fellow at Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, Director of the Program on Youth Justice at the Urban Institute in Washington, D.C., and Senior Research Associate at the National Center for Juvenile Justice in Pittsburgh. Since 1990, Dr. Butts has managed more than $55 million of research and consultation projects. He has worked with policymakers and justice practitioners in 28 states and several countries, published 2 books and dozens of monographs and reports for government agencies and foundations, as well as articles in academic and peer-reviewed journals. He began his justice career as a drug and alcohol counselor with a juvenile court in Eugene, Oregon. Originally from Springfield, Ohio, Jeff is a graduate of the University of Oregon, and he earned a PhD from the University of Michigan. So, for everyone listening, if you hadn't noticed in terms of how this webinar is going, we got to hear from 2 practitioners who are right now on the ground trying to build and coordinate and lead programs that bring together collaborative approaches to public safety. And now in this conversation, we get a chance to hear from 2 national experts. One who spent her career as a practitioner and now travels the country speaking about this work, and one who has spent his career measuring and helping us understand how do we measure whether this stuff is really working. So I'm really excited to wrap up today's webinar with these 2 national experts and get to put some kind of national context and some research and scholarship behind what we heard from Captain Nakayama and from Katie in the city of Atlanta. So with that, Chief Manheimer, I'd love to kick it off with you. So one thing you shared with me the first time we met, is that these collaborative approaches that we're talking about today that are so in vogue, these are not new. They're not as new as some think of it as today. So can you give a little history of where this movement began and what actually is new today? What is happening today that we can understand is new?
Yeah, I do want to give a little perspective. I'm really excited, but bottom line up front, what's really new is that the community policing we started in the early 80s and 90s in response to these very complex problems that were both social as well as criminal, right? The homelessness, the crack cocaine epidemic, the dysfunction of families, all of these root causes, which are really more socially based than sometimes criminally based, it's criminogenic issues. We, in the 80s and 90s, when we started this work, did not have the allied agencies and the public and private sector and really the whole of government looking in and leaning in to how do we reduce crime. Because I think we've known in policing, and while I now sort of talk about it a lot more, I also am still very engaged and involved in the leading edge of what's working in our communities to really address this very violent spate of crime and gun crime particularly, but also property crime that's hit really post-pandemic. And what I can tell you is that this has really disrupted the fact that police and fire and public safety were the only ones who did house calls and were fully really responsible to lead all the community problem solving efforts. So where it used to be that we would be the front door to get people in and really look to very authentically in the 80s and 90s through community policing and long-term problem solving, really pull levers on what we knew at that time, I think throughout our industry, was this delta or triangle of crime. And Atlanta has alluded to it. It's much more sophisticated now, but the general idea is that to really impact crime, we have to impact suspect behavior and the reforms and restorative justice that we apply once we get these suspects in the system. And then place-based, location-based, what are we doing about that? And then third, how is the victim in the marketplace for drugs or whatever it is, the gang locations that are so embedded? How do we impact all three of those? And it is through this whole of government concept that we're seeing now that really says we must align public and private services. We must take that front door where the only people that do house calls, really police, public safety, the 911 service delivery system becomes much more open to this active, engaged response so that individuals and neighborhoods can go through this restorative, reformative lens. And we, as the police, have much more that we can do to intervene, divert, get them out of the system and restore them to wholeness. And so what that really takes, Tim, at the end of the day, to wrap that piece up, is that unless you have that infrastructure that can provide sort of the breakdown of the siloing of resources, of data, of delivery of those services, you're not going to be effective in what we know now. And what we know now and what we're seeing across the country is what Atlanta is doing. And I can give some good examples later as well of others that are doing it. And it's messy work. You need to really not only break down silos, but how do you aggregate that data? How do you actually bring in the analysis to effectively structure delivery of service where people are, where neighborhoods are, and what are those right measures, and how do we then ensure that we have this approach that's actually going to be coordinated, collaborated, measured, and effective strategies and assessment, and then, reform those strategies. How do we ensure that happens?
Chief, thank you so much. So Jeff, I want to bring you into this. And I'm curious, as a researcher, I think, part of a job is to research is take all that messiness and give us some clarity on what we're looking at and what's working, what's not. And I'm curious, in your experience, decades of sitting in a research position and watching this work, studying this work, what are the trends you're seeing in these collaborative approaches to public safety, these civilian and law enforcement led approaches to public safety, and how unique is each city? Are you seeing things happening across cities that are consistent, or is each city unique?
Well, of course, every city's unique, but I think there are commonalities, and people are discovering this perception and this awareness that public safety is about more than law enforcement. And that's just common sense that, people talk about root causes. I tend to try to avoid that term because it attracts bad attention. Because it makes you sound like you're in a dreamland. But everyone knows there are social causes, there are roots of the crime problem. And sometimes when I'm in the mood, I quote, I think it was Desmond Tutu the first time that said, we got to stop pulling people out of the river and send someone upstream to see who's pushing them in. And that's just common sense that we know there are factors that lead to public safety problems. But I'm the person with the PhD in sociology in the front row of the press conference, rolling my eyes when the police department announces their data findings, because there's pressure on public officials and public bureaucracies to use numbers now and to use metrics that sound good. And the first thing I tell, like when a reporter asks me about some crime trend, I say, well, first of all, stop calling it crime. There's no such thing as crime data. We do not have measures of crime. We have measures of police activity, we have measures of citizen reports of crime, and we do have some small number of reports of observed criminal behavior. But that's all the mix that goes into the stew that people refer to casually as crime numbers. The first lesson you learn is that about half of all crimes are not reported to the police department. Sometimes for rational reasons, sometimes due to suspicions and doubts about the police department in a certain neighborhood. But public safety is experienced by people and their families, and you get at that one lens is police data. But I like the fact that Katie brought up all the other data sets that are being used with Peregrine's help to try to measure lots of activity. But even just measuring bureaucratic governmental data metrics still is a lens, but it's not completely satisfying. And so sometimes you have to invest in actually asking people in neighborhoods, have you been harmed? Has your family been victimized lately? And we have a national effort that does that, the National Crime Victimization Survey. And For decades now, people have been saying we need to do that at smaller units, not just national, not just a national estimate, but cities, even neighborhoods. And there are ways to do that that aren't horribly expensive. But we have a long way to go to actually measure public safety. All these things, especially cross whole of government responses, are incredibly important. And I think each city that's embarking on this or trying to improve it is helping move the national conversation. But of course, there's a lot more work to be done.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm curious. Well, I want to come back to you, Chief Manheimer, because you've been the police chief at the podium with Dr. Butts in the front row, and what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Butts, is that from a researcher's perspective, you want more comprehensive data. You want a more comprehensive picture of the human experience that goes beyond what any administrative department can provide.
Tim, can I just quickly say, not just more data, but more sophisticated analysis of data. Yeah. Not just, oh, this went down, therefore whatever we're doing must have worked. Not that simple.
Right. So not that simple. That said, I think the one thing Chief Manheim, I'd love to hear you speak to is, if you're in the seat, if you are the chief, if you are the mayor, if you are the elected official, in some ways you have to work with the data you have, right? And so I think there's the challenge of not having all the data you could possibly like, all the advanced analysis. A lot of city leaders deal with limited resources. So I'm just curious for you, Chief, like how you've, what you see as you look across the country are a couple of cities where, given the resources they have, cities are doing innovative things, are taking the information they have, taking the collaborative approaches they can, and really making an impact on their community.
Yeah, three things about that. The first one I really want to say is we almost have too much data. We have a plethora of data from everything from body-worn camera to the security cameras of individuals in public to the calls for service. I mean, there is so much data there. We're data rich, but we're poor in what's necessary for the analysis. And then to tie that analysis to actual strategies that are effective and evidence and emerging based, there needs to be that progression of all three. We need to bring them together real time. And this is why kind of that whole of government and then bringing in the private sector, we can best analyze what's important for that city at that moment. Because we know, for instance, in juvenile crime, when we did our juvenile crime diversion, we had the assessment and the tools because we knew the factors that drove juvenile crime, including the indicators. What I love about what Atlanta has done, what I'm going to tell you about that I've seen in 3 other cities, is that they have taken the scorecard of what is healthy for their neighborhoods, compared it to what's not healthy. And this is really different layers, everything from who's on a school lunch program to how many grocery stores there are, how many ABC licenses for sort of those place-based strategies, to how are the restorative justice infrastructure within the community-based programs doing, and who of those are willing to be accountable to outcomes and results, and can we all bring together to the table. So I would say Atlanta, Omaha 360, which is another one of these. I have experience in having our mayor in Oakland, Libby Schaaf, when she would come in and drive those ceasefire meetings, she would confront the police on what our data is, do the Jeffrey thing. Where's the fidelity in your data? And why are you just measuring that, right? But she would also hold accountability to the ceasefire efforts, the call-ins, and the faith-based and treatment providers. Why are you going for them? Why are you doing the low-hanging fruit? Why aren't you going to the actual people that are the yours, mine, and ours? The police get them. We are upstream. We're the open door. And then you need to take that handoff, and then you need to do the diversion and the restorative justice treatments to them. So once you have that overarching infrastructure with someone to hold the accountability, you can then start to partner the data to the analysis to the actual strategies that will then provide the safe, health, thriving neighborhoods and individuals.
Yeah, so Chief, what I'm hearing there is the need to, or one of the things I'm pulling out of there is the need to hold lots of different groups accountable, for getting the right information, using that information effectively. And so, coming back to you, Dr. Butts, I'm curious, from our conversations with city and county leaders, sometimes there's some hesitation about working with research institutions. And I'm curious about like how you would encourage cities to think about engaging with research institutions as you know, so many leaders, you know, want to be data driven, want to find the right solution, want to find the best solution out there, you know, or solutions for their cities. How should they work with folks like yourself and folks like John Jay College and other great research institutions around the country?
Yeah, I wrote a snarky blog post once called How to Survive Your Research Partner. Because a lot of, I mean, academics have the same problem any other institution has, that it reinforces behavior which is not conducive to solving social problems. So academics are rewarded for writing things that are appealing to a very small audience. And I always say, you know, you write for journals, first of all, that normal people can't read because journals charge money to read everything, which is horrible. But even when academics are publishing material for the broader public, they have to learn how to communicate and talk to people and translate the knowledge they've developed over time into something a policymaker can understand, that a police official, social services, and that takes a certain kind of academic. So I would say local officials and local government people need to recruit research partners from their area who seem more interested in the problems of the neighborhoods and the city, and interested in how government's working, not only interested in their own careers. And that can take a while. But once you find that partner, you'll know it because they are asking you questions all the time and trying to find out how you see things instead of preaching to you and trying to impress you with their knowledge base. Once you find that person, lock them in, not literally, but get them in a relationship, start working with them over time. They will help, and then partner with your own analysts inside the agency, because everyone's got skilled data analysts now, but having that work with people more schooled about evaluation research and social theory and blending all that together, it takes a while to build. But don't think you can solve the problem just by putting out an RFP and getting some person applying to do that contract work. That has to be a relationship you build over time.
Yeah, so you got to go find them. Got to go find them, and I hear got to go likely find them locally. So we've just got a few minutes left here. If anyone does in the audience have a question for either of our terrific panelists, please do send them across. I have one last question for you, Chief. You know, as you travel the country, you work with law enforcement leaders, you work with elected civilian leaders. One most important lesson for them as we leave today. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, am I off now?
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you. This is my chance to be on the soapbox. For our elected leaders, we all want the same thing, and we all play a piece of that. Our community-based organizations, our department heads in our cities, everywhere else. Leave the sort of the politics and your pet projects and your people that you know in the community, sort of have them at the same level of accountability that you have all of your department heads and all of your other grantees, and make sure that when we all get together, you are driving it from someone who can hold the fidelity and accountability for all of those partners, and understand that it is not only different in every city, but take a look at how other cities are doing it. There are some best practices out there, and most of them are in programs rather than whole of government right now, but we are seeing those leaders come forward. Secondly, I suggest for our law enforcement leaders, the way we can help to open ourselves up to both the community-based organizations, the other services we need, is to ensure that we have the actual sitting at the table. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So get active, get engaged, be a part of these transformative efforts. At the end of the day, it's less workload for you and better outcomes for the community. But look to some of those for peer exchanges. Lots of us in BJA and others are here to help with the examples of how they're doing it, lessons learned in other organizations.
Thank you, Chief. So Dr. Butts, going to you, what are one or two things you wished every city leader, elected, appointed, sworn, civilian, understood about research and evaluation and getting at the best solutions for communities?
The one thing I wish all elected officials and people in the public eye would learn is how to distinguish a difference from something that implies causality. And I alluded to this earlier, but I hear people all the time saying, we started program A and shootings went down 14%, and then they claim credit for that. I'm always saying, that's not proof of anything yet. There's a lot more work to be done. Just because something went down doesn't mean you've successfully made it go down. And I'm always saying to people, have a researcher. You don't need the researcher at the podium. Have the researcher back behind the curtain helping you learn how to talk about it in a way that's not misleading. And I think if you have that partner helping you learn how to craft the sentences, the public will start to trust more when city officials talk.
Well, thank you. We are now at time. And I just want to say a thank you to all our panelists, to National League of Cities for co-hosting this with us, for Captain Nakayami and Katie Ward for sharing their terrific work on the ground, for Chief Mannheimer and Dr. Butts for sharing your expertise. We are so grateful here at Peregrine to have such terrific partners around the country to get to share the great work that you all are pioneering. For everyone that listened today, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more, please, you can visit our website and find out more there. Please reach out. We'd be happy to start up a conversation with you if you're interested in learning more about Peregrine or any of the great work that's happening with our partners across the country. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for joining us. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you to our panelists and NLC, and we look forward to seeing you next time.